Okay. So what we're going to talk about is again, the initial stages of a group, and then kind of what are the skills necessary to overcome a lot of these things. So in the initial stage, participants test the atmosphere and get acquainted. And if you want to think about it, it's the same process that we all go through when we're getting into a new social situation. You want to figure out who you can trust, who you can't trust. You want to figure out, quote unquote, who the players are, who's going to take lead roles, who's going to be followers. And in this case, they're looking at the group leader to see kind of how they're going to either control the room or make the group happen. And if you think about that, that's what we do in any given social situation. We go in, we look who we're comfortable with, who we're not comfortable with. We kind of test the grounds a little bit, and then we slowly integrate into that social situation. During the during this phase, risk taking is relatively low. Most of the time, especially in initial groups, the conversation stays pretty ambiguous. It stays pretty much on the surface level. And exploration into issues is very tentative. And one of the group skills of the group leader is to constantly be gauging this at where the comfort is of the clients in these initial phases when you're developing trust. Because if you push too hard in the first stages of a group, you're going to alienate that person. And then, if they're required to be there, they're just going to come, they're going to sit there and just with their arms folded. If they're doing this for their own self growth and understanding, they'll just not come anymore. They'll stop going to the group. So it's a very important skill to develop in seeing where your clients are in the comfort of exploration, because in this first phase, until trust is built, exploration is very, very tentative. Members often are concerned with whether they are going to be included or excluded in the group, where their place is. And the central issue, and I think actually these first two are important to note, behavior-wise and psychologically. Psychologically, the initial part of the group is trust versus mistrust, and trust being that a person is going to be heard, even when other group members bring up criticisms of what they just heard, the group leader will be there to facilitate a better conversation. Because a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes there are group members, when they're testing that water in the beginning, who a person will bring up an issue and they'll instantly get criticized for what they did or how they did it. And as a group leader, we have to understand that's a dynamic going on. One person is testing to see where their limits are by that criticism or by that feedback. And on the other level, that person who told the story is looking at you to see how you're going to resolve that conflict, how you're going to manage it within the group setting. So trust develops in two pathways. One is between the leader and the participants, that's path one. And path two is between the group members themselves. And again, the skill of a facilitator is to develop those trusting relationships between group members. The other thing about especially the first parts of groups is being comfortable with silence and awkwardness, okay? When human beings are in a social situation and they're in conversation, and especially if they're guiding the conversation, we're really, really poor at giving time for people to think about the response or to figure out how they can respond in a safe way, especially in a new group. Um, and one of the skills that I would encourage everybody to work on is finding enjoyment in silence, and not having the urge to just simply move on or simply go through. You'll probably have noticed that even in this class, the average instructor, when they ask a question and then wait for a student response, is less than 2 seconds. Yet it takes 8 to 10 seconds for us to even understand the question and start formulating an answer. And that statistic goes true in any social situation. So one of the skills that I would like you all to work on, and maybe this is one I should be working on, I think, um, is when you ask somebody a question, I want you to mentally at least count to 15 before um, before breaking any type of silence that is happening. So I'd like you all to start practicing that skill. Ask a question, mentally wait 15 seconds, and then if they haven't said anything in that time, then go ahead and continue on with the conversation. But again, especially in these first initial phases, it takes about 5 to 8 seconds to realize a question has been asked, and then you need to give another 8 or so more seconds for them to actually gain a response. Now, in the group setting, the kind of standard is to wait 20 seconds before giving a response. But we're kind of starting on the low end and working up to that. But truthfully, when you're in the group setting, it's a good idea to ask a question. And in this initial phases, there'll be a lot of awkward silence, probably, not always, but just to sit there and mentally count in your head to 20 before responding. Members are, and because of members are deciding how they want to disclose and how to do it safely, especially in these initial phases. A lot have a lot of fear about how they respond. If you think about individuals who are forced into groups for legal reasons, a lot of times they have a lot of fear about talking about their situation, because it was them saying things and saying the wrong things that maybe led them to a tougher penalty for whatever they did, or ended up getting their children taken away, for example. And that's just an example. And so, especially when you're working with very vulnerable populations, it's important to understand that they don't feel safe. In a lot of cases, like I said, with people who are forced to go to groups, we are part of the system in their minds. And so it's important to give that space for them to really initiate and be able to feel safe in talking. We do that through promoting silence sometimes, and just sitting there silently, okay? In some groups, in the very first of some groups, one activity that a lot of facilitators use is they use silent thinking for a while. So they'll ask a question to reflect on something that they're learning in the group, and then just say, all right, this is what we're going to do. For the next 2 minutes, we're going to sit here in silence and think about the question and think about how it applies to our life. In these beginning phases, it's also a good idea to use some visualization techniques. So not only can you just have them sit silently for 2 minutes, you can also say, what I want you to do for the next 60 seconds is I want you to visualize yourself doing something different. Let's say maybe it's a relapse prevention class or an anger management class, and you have them bring up a very difficult situation that they dealt with, and you have them visualize what they would have done differently, and things like that. And in the beginning parts of a group, those are very safe ways to get your clients to know, one, it's safe to think about these things, and I can take the time to really develop my response. Okay. And we've kind of talked about all of these, the concerns experienced by group members. There's anxiety about being accepted and rejected, just like in any social situation. But often in these group situations, there's a lot more at stake. Again, I'll go back to individuals who are forced to go to treatment groups. They also have the need to make sure that they're accepted by the facilitator. They have that extra anxiety that they need to be careful about what they say, because that person is the one that's going to give them their certificate and recommendation for completion. Okay. And there's always concerns about being judged by others and appearing stupid, and less intelligible. And in a lot of ways, these two things are behaved in two separate ways. One way is that the client will not be engaged. They'll give surface level answers to every question. In the other case, they will try to overcompensate for what they think their deficit is. So, it's and this is no judgment on anybody's intelligence. It's a person who feels they know more than maybe what they actually do. And so they start doing what's called caretaking of the group and start giving advice to everybody, even though that advice may not be appropriate. Okay. Concerns about not fitting into the group. Okay, so not only do we have concerns about being accepted and rejected, we wonder if we should be there as group members, whether or not, my situation really belongs here with these other people. And then not knowing what is expected. Okay. And this again on the skill level is on the facilitator, and making sure that each group should be ran similarly. And if you're changing something up in the group, you should let them know in the prior group. And that is one skill that I would encourage you to practice in dealing with, whoever you're dealing with and whatnot. If you're going to be doing something different the next time, tell them then, don't just have the experience waiting for them. Okay. Concerns over communicating feelings and thoughts effectively, and worrying whether or not they're going to get what they want across. And again, this is a facilitation skill. And really, why when we talk about treatment and stuff, we talk about things like matching language to our clients, because often the intimidations of not feeling effective feelings and thoughts is the fact that your group members see you as the expert. And so there is this fear of expressing something wrong to that expert. And this is why in a lot of treatment modalities, we want to avoid jargon. We want to avoid fancy words. We want to avoid all of those things that we learn in college and the language we learn in college, and bring that down to our, not down, that's not appropriate. Bring our words to meet what our clients are talking, how they're talking, and matching their style. And probably, so now let's talk about probably some overall skills of starting a group that really kind of helps get a group rolling and starts the group process really well. Because if you noticed in those previous slides, the fears center around, will people know my experience? Will people understand me? Will I be accepted because of my past? If you looked at those themes that we just looked at, There's real fear about being accepted. Okay. But when we do what's called dealing with the here and now, it tends to energize a group in the beginning. And focusing on uh, uh, things that clients can really give a clear definition of, like their current experiences, their current situation. So probably one of the most common facilitation skills that I've seen is each week the leader will ask, tell me about your week, and then they'll say, is there a situation in which you used one of the skills we've learned in group, and tell us about that. Or it might just be simply, did you have any issues with anger? Did you have any issues with substance abuse this week? And really focusing not on the past, not on what brought people to that group setting, but really focusing on the right here, right now. This is what we're dealing with. This is the life we have. And this is the more confident memory group members have. Now, what we hope is that drawing on the here and now serves as a springboard for exploring everyday life concerns. Okay. And I think this is an important aspect that we do need to understand about the treatment process is, if you look at the stereotype of counseling, it's all about bringing the person back to earlier experiences in life. If we go to the extreme with psychoanalysis, we want to look at the child's experience between 0 and 5 and their relationship with their parents. That's the extreme, going back and exploring those issues with the idea. What we're doing is we're trying to find the root cause, and then we can work on that root cause. However, when we look at effective treatment, it kind of works in the opposite direction. What we have learned through research is that when you focus on a client's here and now, what's going on in their life that is driving decisions from a day-to-day basis, based on the situation they're in, based on the emotions they're experiencing, based upon the social factors in the situation, we have much, much more success with client treatment. And in fact, and then over time, once a person starts to be able to control their here and now, to start living healthy, then they can go and they can explore those trauma paths and those trauma issues. And probably the theory behind this is if you've taken a class on trauma, I think I discussed it here in this class. When you've experienced a very traumatic past, a lot of times the brain will create false memories to kind of blind it, or you might not have any memories of it at all because the brain feels it's so traumatic that it'll end up breaking you even further apart than where you are right now. Well, if you can create a self, a healthy self in the here and now, if you can create a person who's able to manage their symptoms from a day-to-day basis and create a happiness in the here and now and the situations that face them now, if you think about the trauma brain, then it will be much, much more ready to go explore those past memories and those past issues to come to some resolution with them. And so we kind of have reversed the formula, if you want to think of it that way, where we don't start with a person's past. We start with right here, right now. Let's talk about day-to-day symptoms, day-to-day issues, and work through those. And then as you progress and you become more and more successful at managing today, then it's much easier to start exploring the past, if that makes any sense. And then it was mentioned, so focusing on the day-to-day, it helps clients feel safe, secure. It allows them, they have more clear memories. They're able to talk about it easier. They're able to really start to build rapport with other clients, because what they'll find is that, you know, we all have different lives, we all have different situations, but either our addiction or our mental health commonly drives us to do things that aren't in our benefit. And we learn that, oh my gosh, other people experience that too. And so you start to build rapport within your group member setting. The second key aspect to a beginning of a group is the development of trust. And I told you that there were two types of trust: the trust between the facilitator and the clients, and the trust between the clients. Excuse me. So the facilitator has two roles in this situation. One is to build trust between you and the client, but then the other aspect is to role play, or to demonstrate, or to model, whichever term you want to use, how to develop genuine trust and everything between each of the group members. In fact, it's interesting because with low performing groups, ones that are having a very difficult time getting up and running and stuff, this can be a key indicator on whether you're bringing that low performing group out of its rut. Is that when you see group members, when they're interacting with each other, kind of mimic what you've modeled for them, and what you've shown to show groups. I remember, I don't know, one of my favorite lines is whenever someone in a group tells me a story, and then I reflect back to them, I always say, all right, I want to tell you what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong. And I remember a group I was having such a difficult time with, and then all of a sudden all the group members were saying that same thing, and then eventually we're actually able to move through the process of the group, because they started to use the skills that the facilitator was practicing with them. So in this context, again, I would bring this up. Your job is to develop trust between you and your client, and for you to model that behavior between the group members, okay? And I mentioned this in the beginning of the class. What are the number one skills of a good therapist, a good counselor, no matter where you are, whether it's a group individual setting, or if you're in a social work setting or anything else, is careful attending and genuine listening, okay? We're going to do some skill development about attending and listening. That's going to look like you finding someone who is someone you can talk to. Maybe it's a partner, a friend, a coworker. And what I'm going to challenge you is to have them tell you a story. And then I want you to reflect back to them what you heard and ask them to correct you when you're wrong. Now, if you don't have someone close to you, and you don't, or you want to do this on an individual level, one of the things that we even did in graduate school is that we took notes about our favorite TV show or something, and we would write notes about what was happening in the movie or in the show. And then we'd go back in a couple of days later and do an accuracy check on our notes. Did Joey really say that, or did Bill really say, these things? And you'll find it interesting that sometimes we hear things differently on different days and different situations, and it's all based upon our own situation and what we're bringing. But Genuine attending and listening is learning the skill to listen first and respond second. Okay. And to listen completely before interrupting someone or start shaking your head, going, yeah, yeah, okay, I get this, I get this. Okay. Because unfortunately, one of the things that we don't do very skillfully as human beings is when someone is talking to us, we're already developing a response in our head, usually based on our own experience and our own ideas. And that can get pretty dangerous in the counseling setting. I don't de-emphasize this in any ways. This is not a skill to take lightly. And I want to push this with this class, that learning how to listen without developing an initial response is one of the better skills that is going to keep you successful with clients, help you professionally, and also keep you ethical in your practice. Okay. So I would really like to encourage everybody to start developing the skill of listening and attending, listening without developing a response, without, while you're listening, saying, just listening and trying to understand what's being told to you. The next skill is the attending part. So, and this is the difficult part, because you're sitting there listening and you're trying to make sure you're not trying to respond on your own. So you have your own stuff going on, but at the same time, you need to make sure that the client knows that you're there and you're in the moment, being present. Okay. A lot of the buzzword for being in the moment and being in the present is, I can't remember it, which is probably a good thing, well, I can't remember, but what it really is compassion. Okay. It's the ability to be there and be with someone completely. And I use the word compassion because it really is showing someone that you're available to them. Okay. And the other skill on this is in the group setting, you also need to facilitate listening and attending with other group members. Because what will commonly happen in the group setting is someone will be telling a story and someone over there will start shaking their legs saying, or someone will start raising their hand, oh. And having that skill to continue attending to that person's story and having that other person calm down and hold on, wait for him to finish. And it's also the skill when a person gets interrupted to say, wait a minute, we're listening to Joe right now. Let's let Joe finish it, and then we can complete your ideas. We can talk about what you're thinking. Okay. And again, it's that modeling of skills, modeling that behavior that you want them to see, to helping them learn how to listen before responding, and attending and being completely present. Empathy, and I think anyone going in our field, we would find probably very high in empathy. But empathy is the ability to understand an individual situation, even when we haven't personally experienced it ourselves. That's going to be the definition of empathy we're going to use. So in some contexts, it's understanding the emotions, understanding the context, understanding sometimes the anger, and really being able to attend that, okay, and experience that with that, and genuinely being able to say, man, fully admitting, what you just stated, I've never went through personally, but I felt what you were saying. Thank you for sharing. Those type of, and that goes into our next one, into genuineness and self-disclosure. Okay. So we have empathy, we have compassion, listening, and attending. And then that leads into being genuine. Okay. And the other thing is self-disclosure. Okay. Um, when I was running relapse prevention groups, I had clients ask all the time um, whether I had the issue they have, whether it be a substance, alcohol, drugs, or those kinds of things, and ever struggled with it. And uh, it's important to always be open and honest with your clients, and be willing to say, either yes, I struggled with it for years, and I do have my own personal experience with my own recovery, or it's being completely honest and saying, I've never been addicted to a substance. I do have these issues with other aspects of my life and habits in other parts of my life, but no, I don't have the same experience as you do. And um, I will tell you, when you do that, you'll get a little bit of resistance, um, and everyone will start to question, well, what are you doing here? Either outwardly or or silently. Um, but always wrap a self-disclosure up with the terms, but this group really isn't about me. It's not about my process or my experience. It's about you and your fellow group members. And so, and that's why we're in this group setting, so that you all can share what your experiences are. And it's always important to wrap those up, even if you do have, if you're an addiction counselor and you had addiction issues in the past, if you're a domestic violence survivor, you should always wrap up with the notion that, so that's been my experience, but my experience isn't important, yours is. Let's talk about yours. And that goes to the next level of respect. And that's really showing that, what, I'm either similar to you guys or I'm not, but that doesn't matter. What matters is you. Okay. And the other issue is issues with respect, is making sure that you show up, you're present, you're dressed appropriately. And in a lot of times, it's making sure that you leave your own junk outside the counseling room. Okay. Um, I fully admit, with all the years that I was working with colleagues, working with even in my own life, I will tell you, counselors and therapists and social workers don't have non-chaotic lives. We don't have, we have life struggles. We have relationship issues. We have issues with family. We have issues in our community. We have all kinds of things that are completely ours. And one of the skills and one of the challenges is that when you're in that moment with your clients, you're there, not your argument with your spouse, not the bills that are due, not all those kinds of things. And that is what showing respect is. Okay. And I will promise you on this end is that when you're having a rough day, your group members will notice it. They will notice when you're not completely present. And I'll be honest with you, dependent upon the type of group, sometimes they'll take advantage of it. And sometimes they will try to make the group about the group leader instead about themselves. So keep that in mind. And in your situations that you're in right now, whenever you're entering a professional situation, to develop the skill, always try to, I used to, before I went into the room, I used to take an empty piece of air out of my pocket, and it was a symbolic way, and I would drop it right in front of the door outside the office I was going into, or the meeting I was going into. And I would always say, okay, I'm leaving my stuff here, I'll pick it up on my way out. And then I would go in and I'd enter. And that was one way that I dealt with it. The other, I'll be completely honest, in my early days of doing groups, in doing community presentations, and doing classes, when I started teaching college, there's a certain Eminem song. I can't remember the name of it right at the moment, but it's about being in the moment, those kinds of things. And I would put that on full blast before a group session, or before a meeting, or before a community presentation. And that was my gateway. That was my transition point. Okay. And so both of those were things that I did. And I would encourage you to come up with different ways for you to transition from personal professional life into counselor social work mode, as I would call it. Okay. In the early phases, carrying confrontation. Okay. I'm actually going to ask Elsa to talk about this on Thursday, because there's things called crucial conversations, different type of methods that you can use about how to confront individuals who are starting to get more aggressive, who are trying to, or who are being angry, or on the other end, that they have a really hard time with confrontation, and if you do it wrong, they're going to freeze up even more. So on Thursday, after talking about children, I'm going to have her introduce this thing called crucial conversations. And then we will spend a couple weeks, probably, a couple weeks for sure, on how to deal with the issues of confrontation in groups. Okay. Because it's both an art and a science. All of this is an art and a science, but dealing with confrontation tends to be one of the biggest fears of group facilitators, but also one of the things that really can make a group either build a group and have the group learn skills on how to deal with conflict and confrontation, or it can deteriorate the group. And I've had situations in the past where confrontation just was not handled well enough. So sometimes I had to bring in a second co-facilitator for that group. Sometimes I had to change the whole entire facilitators for the group and start the group all over and do a complete reset. So dealing with confrontation effectively is a very important skill, and we'll spend a couple weeks on that one. Okay. All right, and just to kind of go through this, again, in the beginnings of a group, the main tasks is to formulate clear and specific goals for a group. Absence of a goal, considerable floundering and aimless sessions. I will say that, I worked with a lot of old school facilitators who just wanted to do what are called process groups, meaning that what you do in a process group, and it's healthy to do process groups, and don't get me wrong, they're good to put in there every once in a while. And in fact, some really good models is a person has a structured goal group, and then maybe they also have a process group that they go to as well. So I'm not saying it doesn't have any space or purpose, but I worked with a lot of old school group people who just want to do process groups and just kind of no goals, no nothing. Let's just talk about feelings. Let's talk about emotions. Let's do that. And those groups never actually result in anything. And they result in what I have found in the absence of having goals for a group is it becomes a self-rewarding thing for the counselor or the group facilitator Hence, I think a lot of people want that, because a process group makes you feel good because you help people process emotions and feelings, but you didn't really accomplish anything. Collaborative process and identifying goals, meaning that we should always have room for our clients to implement goals and rules. And goals lead to contracts and homework assignments. Okay, and so we're going to talk about this in the guise of doing an assignment that is posted on lesson planning, where we'll look at a type of group or a type of process called motivational interviewing and motivational interviewing groups. And you'll develop a lesson plan around that concept. And this will be one of the things that we'll look at, is how do you establish goals based on it? And then how do you go through and make sure there's collaboration that's going to lead to something solidified, some type of contract or homework. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, probably starting next Tuesday, about the lesson planning. But I think right here is a good place to stop and check in with everybody and see if anybody has any questions. Is there any questions from the content we went over today? Okay. Kathleen, you have your hand up.
As always. So would the first thing that when you started talking about facilitating, would it be the same thing as our talking circles?
Yeah, so Kathleen, it very much is. When we talk about talking circles and those especially among Native American communities, the difference is again dependent upon the Native American group and stuff. They all handle talking groups a little bit differently. Some of them, some have it's a group thing. In other contexts, it's led by a elder in the community. And so this is a very important point, and I appreciate you bringing this up. If you're going to implement something that is of a cultural base, such as a talking circle, which is an awesome idea, okay, and I've seen it done very, very effectively, as long as it's not the generic type, the type that is written about in books that use the words like Native American talking circles, okay? Because one of the things that we will hit on a little bit is making sure that we're culturally appropriate, okay? And it's recognizing that in talking circles, yes, there's a long history among a lot of Native American tribes. In fact, I would argue group treatment really didn't start in Western culture in the 1950s, as the literature suggested. It started a long, long time ago with Native American communities. And so what I would encourage you to do, Kathleen, is to look at the specific population you're working with, and make sure that if you're going to use a talking circle formulation in your group work, make sure it's salient for the community you're working with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. Any other questions? All right, gang. Well, like I said, so this Thursday, we will start the class with what's called a thinking check-in. It'll probably be something like reading a quote and interpreting it, just to kind of get us rolling in that group process. And then we will have a guest speaker who will come and talk about working with children, because as I said, it is much different than working with adults, as many of you probably already know. And the other issue with children too, and I'll bring it up, is there's this idea of developmentally appropriate practices. where, you know, when you're doing child treatment or working with children, you shouldn't be working with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old on the same level. Okay. And we found that that's been a mistake made both in education and in treatment of children. And so with children, because they're in such a rapid developmental mode, we always have to start to think about where are they developmentally and meet them there, just like we do with adults and language and mannerisms. We want to meet our clients where they're at. So, and she'll talk about that. And I'm also going to ask her to bring up the notion of what's called crucial conversations, because that will start our conversations about resolving conflicts and resolving confrontation issues within the group setting. All right. With that being said, I do want to note that we did get rid of the weekly reflections. And so also this Thursday, I will be setting up individual forums for each of you so that you and I can have those conversations, and that will kind of take the place of your weekly reflections. So we'll start that as well this Thursday. Okay.
So you have you decided the reflection for last week? What week is that supposed to be under?
So that one should be the week 8, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only one that y'all should have do, the last reflection that you should be worrying about is the week 8. Let me look though real quick and just verify.
Mr. Peterson, I had a question.
Yes, just really quick. So yeah, it is the week 8 reflection, and that's the last reflection that you need to worry about. Yes, your question, please.
So when we ask individual questions and whatnot, do we need to write them down, or is it just a personal experience that we're just trying out with someone?
It's more of a personal experience. And really what I'd like you to do, Christina, is when you're talking to them, tell them, listen, I'm if you want to be fully open to them, listen, I'm trying to develop these skills, so I need you to be honest with me. But can you tell me a story about, you know, I don't know, depending on who they are, you know, tell me a story about, you know, a fun time you had lately or something like that. And then what I want you to do is I want you to listen to it. Okay. Do not formulate any ideas in your head. And then when they're done talking, say, okay, can I tell you what I heard? And can you tell me how accurate I was? How, if I heard you correctly or not? That's kind of the exercise I'd like you to try. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, cool. And again, if you don't have anyone, another great way to do this, and then Christina, this is one where you would kind of want to write something down, is if you take a 15-minute clip of a TV show, all right, and then listen to the complete 15 minutes, and then afterwards write down everything that you remember hearing or seeing or doing in that clip. I wouldn't do 15 minutes. I'd do 5 minutes. Let's not do 15, maybe 5 minutes, and then write everything down, and then go review and compare your notes to the show again. So look at that 5 minutes again and go, okay, I did pretty good on this round. So just to kind of build that skill. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Peterson, I have a question for next semester. I don't know if you got my email.
Naomi, do you want to schedule some an appointment time with me, or
Yeah, that'll work.
okay, all right, yeah, in the Canvas shell, if you go down to the getting started, there's a place that you can click and you can schedule some time with me.
Okay. Great, thank you.
All right. And it's my understanding that you should be ready to be done. So I'm excited to take a look at that and help you get it done. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get out of here.